Good afternoon. How are you all this afternoon? Thank the Lord for the cool weather. So we're going to go ahead and get started because it is always important to be on time. My name is Imara Kennedy, and I'm the National Director for Communications and Community Engagement for AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and also serve as the National Chairperson for an initiative of AHF called the Black Leadership AIDS Crisis Coalition, which was truly started to connect the work of AHF and the work of empowering black communities from a for us, by us model. So we have black chapters in 7 communities across the country here, Chicago, South Florida, Los Angeles, throughout Ohio, throughout Texas, really connected to where there are high populations of black Americans and where we know there are high populations of black Americans that have been impacted in some way by HIV and AIDS. But the impetus of black, which you can see, is to really empower our community. To empower our community not only around sexual health and wellness, but to empower our community around loving ourselves, to empower our community around being in community, because these days, that's a real challenge these days, and to really just empower ourselves to love ourselves. So we invite you to stay engaged with Black. We have lots of activities, and now that we are slowly moving back into a hybrid space, we're actually, you see all these cameras. It's not because, we celebrity status here. It's because we are being innovative in terms of recognizing that George Matthew Johnson has a fan base and a love base, across the country and across the city, and also recognizing that we wanted to ensure that folks felt comfortable engaging in whatever way that they want to. So we can all, if you want to all turn around and do the camera, you can wave to everybody because we are officially on Facebook Live streaming this as well. So hello to all of our Facebook family as well. As it was shared, and we really want to thank George for his support of just community, that a portion of the proceeds from today's book sales will go to both the Hammond's House Museum as well as Aid Atlanta, which is a tremendous legacy HIV/AIDS service organization that has been based here in Atlanta in the trenches of serving all communities. But really, there's a strong emphasis on communities of color, of addressing the issue of HIV and AIDS in our community. And I don't like to say to ensure that folks can live with HIV, but to say to ensure that folks can thrive living with HIV. And to ensure that folks know that HIV does not define who they are. So we are so proud of the work of Aid Atlanta. And to just give us a brief greeting, I'd like to bring up a dear sister friend who's been in the trenches of this work, started when she was 10. And we recently celebrated her 20th anniversary with the organization. And we are so proud of her leadership as, one of the handful of sisters across this country that are leading AIDS service organizations. Please welcome Nicole Roebuck.
Good evening or good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Nicole Roebuck. I thank you so much for coming out and supporting this event today. I see my favorite DJ over there. And I see so many familiar faces, so thank you for coming. Aid Atlanta, as Imara has talked about, we've been around for 39 years, going on 40. And we're going to be around as long as people need us and need the services. Hopefully we'll be able to go out of business and we can cure HIV and get rid of the stigma and all of the things that are surrounding the HIV epidemic. I know we're dealing with a COVID pandemic, and thankfully there's a vaccine, that has come out for COVID, but it's been 30 plus years, way too long, and no vaccine yet in sight for HIV. So that's why we're still here. That's why we're still doing the work, and that's why we're going to continue to stay committed. We thank author George M. Johnson for being here and gracing us with his presence and his talents. And again, we thank you, we welcome you, and I hope you have a good time, and I hope that it's going to be a good conversation in Black.
Thank you. And I'd be remiss to say that the whole idea and concept of conversations in Black actually was Nicole's brainchild. And so we started this about a month ago, and she did an amazing conversation with Pastor Monty Norwood from Bible Way Ministries and a dear brother and friend of Aid Atlanta and of AHF, someone we all know well, Dr. David Malbranch, and really looking at the intersectionality of HIV in the faith community. And that was virtual. And so now we have moved from the virtual screen to the partial virtual screen to in person as well. I also want to just introduce some of the team here from Aid Atlanta and from AHF and Black. We've got Teresa Waters Dunstan, who's back there FaceTiming herself. Teresa is actually one of the co-chairs of the local chapter here of Black, as well as Jason Griggs, and he is checking out the Facebook Live so we can have any questions from there. We've got Ramses Frederick, who is working with us with the AIDS Walk here. And then back in the back, walking down, is Darlene Prince, who was there when you were checking in. And from our Aid Atlanta family, we have our illustrious Ed Doolittle, who manages a number of things, including the website. Ed, quick wave. And then John Santos, who is all things fundraising and events. So he's the fund and the fun. But in order to get the fund, you must have fun. And in order to have fun, you must help the fund. So that's John Santos, and we're happy to have him. And on that note, we encourage you that if you have not, please stop by the Aid Atlanta table. There's information. It's not too late to register and sign up for the AIDS Walk. It's taking place September 25th in the heart of Piedmont Park at the Active Oval. We have got it completely set up that it will, ensure that it's a safe event. As you know, over the last three or four years, we have taken the AIDS Walk to new levels, and now it culminates with a music festival. And so after you do the 5K walk or run, and we've shifted the path a little bit to shake it up a little bit, because everybody was starting to be able to cheat on the big hill. So now we shook it up a little bit. So now there's 4 big hills. No, I'm just kidding. No, we mixed it up a little bit, as we continue to take it to the next level. And the Music Fest this year will feature Atlanta's own Chris Ludacris Bridges and then 7th Streeter. And so we encourage you to form a team, join a team. It's great for those that aren't booed up. It's a great opportunity to possibly get booed up. We don't make any, recommendations or promises. If you are booed up and you're trying to get rid of your boo, it's a great way to get rid of your boo too, But all jokes aside, it's a great community event. And the really wonderful thing about it is that the funds raised go to support 10 incredibly impactful and life-saving and life-transforming organizations based here in the local community. And so for every dollar that they raise, AHF matches that dollar for dollar. So I can't make a recommendation, but you may want to check out one of the teams that's here today that may be interested in having you support their team. Just saying. But all jokes aside, really, if there is an organization that really is true to your heart, we encourage you. You can join a team under them and support their fundraising efforts. And, it's about awareness, education, but also, and I know Daniel and Nicole and so many others is here that can attest to, these critical dollars, unrestricted dollars that are raised, help to keep the organizations open. No shade, no less love for the CDC. The CDC dollars help to keep the programs going. But the ironic part is you can't really have programs if you don't have people to run the programs. So I say that to say that these unrestricted dollars are so critical. And so you may say, well, how does my $5 or my $10 benefit? But it truly, truly does. Because let's think about it. If you recall the presidency of Barack Obama, it was millions of people that gave $5 or $10 here that equated to 10 to 15 millions of dollars. So the easy thing is here, your $5 or $10 actually translates to $10 or $20. And so just imagine right here, if we all gave just $20, $25, you possibly could end up paying somebody's salary. You know what I mean, when you do that right. So I just share that because sometimes it's hard to match that equation. So we encourage you to stop by. Also, immediately following the formal program, George will be right up top here. We'll just form a line and sign. He'll sign copies of the book. I'm sure if you want to take pictures and all that good stuff. And we're just so thrilled to have George Johnson here with us today. And I will ask for not your forgiveness, but for your understanding so you don't think I'm crazy. George and I have gotten to know each other for the last 7 years because he's been doing a lot of work with us at AHF, particularly through Black. And so those of us who talk to him quite often call him Matthew. So if you wonder if I intertwine and say George or Matthew, it's not because I'm turning 50 and I'm old and crazy. It really is because the M stands for Matthew. So I just want y'all to know that. So y'all are like looking like, does he know who he's talking to? So, but I mean, really, George doesn't need any introduction. But I mean, he's an amazing, amazing journalist. He is amazing, amazing activist. He is amazing, excuse me, and forgive me, because this is my snafu. They are an amazing journalist. They are an amazing activist. They are an amazing human being. And I would have to say that I am so honored to not only call them a colleague, but to call them a friend. And we have had some amazing conversations. He has helped me in my own education and awareness of just humanity, you know, and I think that's so much of what human interaction should really be about. I love that they are just relentless in their fight for justice for all people, and to truly be a voice for the voiceless, and to truly just represent in ways that so many of us are working to represent, no matter what your gender identity, no matter what your sexual orientation, no matter who you are. And in an interesting kind of a way, you know, from the faith lens, we oftentimes say that people are secure in who they are and whose they are. And I would say across the board, George Matthew Johnson is an individual that is severely secure in who they are as a person. And I just have so much love and respect for them. And I'm so proud of this latest book. And many know that we had the great pleasure and blessing that George gifted us with, we at AHF being able to take his first project, All Boys Aren't Blue, and to make it into what really went beyond what any of us thought. I mean, even as recently as last week, you know, George and I were like, can you believe that this thing is doing so well? Like, this is just a crazy idea that we were talking about one day, and now it's at festivals all over, and, you know, people are asking for it all over the country, and his last book has been translated into 7 different languages, and so it just really shows, again, the idea of when someone is so true to what their work is and what their purpose is and living their life in purpose, that it is endless possibilities. And with that, I do want to just put in a shameless plug is that I don't even know what we call it anymore because it's not a film, but you know, the broadcast dramatic version of All Boys Aren't Blue that we collaborated on together is actually going to be on the silver screen as a part of the Out on Film Festival. So on September 26th, so here's your weekend. See, you already got your weekend planned. September 25th, you're going to come to the AIDS Walk, have a great time. It ends at 2 o'clock, so you can still go home, get all rested up, have all day, do whatever you do, church, you know, wherever. Just be careful going to Lenox, you know, and all those different places. And then at 7 o'clock at the Landmark Theaters, AHF in Black is proud to partner with Out on Film to offer the screening of All Boys Aren't Blue as a free community screening. So we'll be sharing more about that as it comes, but we're really, really excited. And that's at 7 o'clock p.m. But without further ado, it is my honor, my blessing, just my heartfelt love to bring forward a dear friend, a dear brother, a dear powerful, powerful change agent, George Matthew Johnson. He forgot to do the twirl. Don't y'all want to look? He got this fly outfit. Do a quick twirl. Got the mic further. And then, y'all, we got to give it up for DJ Said, spinning on the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s. So first of all, welcome back to Atlanta.
Yes, I was just here last week.
I was going to say, you've been here a few times. I just want to again say just a special thank you, George. I mean, you have done so much for the work. You have really, truly been a voice for so many that have felt like they don't have a voice or feel like they have been silenced. And so I want to start, before we even get into the book or the books, what is it that drives you each day just to wake up and be George and be so clear about your life's work?
Yeah, so hello everyone. It's very good to, I guess, be back in person somewhat. Hi, Facebook. What drives me every day? I think for me, what drives me is the fact that there are still so many Black LGBTQ children who still don't feel seen. So many Black LGBTQ children who still have no family structure, still have no place to go, still aren't being not only not seen on like television, but not seen in the words of books, not seen in essay collections, not seen in anything. And so when I wake up every morning, there are just some days where I feel really great, but then there are some days where I feel really heavy. And usually on those days, I'm usually thinking about people like Nigel Shelby. I'm usually thinking about people like his name is slipping me right now, but I'm just always thinking about like those particular Black queer youth whose stories we've heard about, who didn't get the same chances that I was fortunate enough to get. And so it always gives me the strength, the courage, the fortitude, all of the words to continue to put my story out there so that they know that they do exist. I always say, like, I'm not the first person to have my story. I'm just one of the first people that has been allowed to tell it. And so when I think about the whole idea of heroes and how, we grow up and we're taught about Martin Luther King and we're taught about Malcolm X and we're taught about all these people, even when we're taught about people who were Black and queer, we are taught about it absent their queerness. And so growing up, I had heroes that were stolen from me. And so my work every day is to create a generation of kids who don't have the same heroes stolen from them. And so I try to live my life as publicly as possible so that they know that when my story gets told, you cannot tell it absent my queerness. The way that they would do Baldwin, the way that they would do Nikki Giovanni, the way that they would do Angela Davis. I just have a refusal to allow them to continue to do that to us moving forward. And so I think that's what gets me up every morning to do what I do. If you follow me, you know I do a lot of photo shoots that sometimes push the edge a little bit. I'm always very, very nervous about them, but then I always think about like who needs to see them too. Like I need to do it for myself, but I'm doing this for someone else too because it breaks space. And so that's what gets me going every morning.
So talk about the journey, because I know we've talked about it some. I still recall when you were first beginning to write All Boys Aren't Blue.
Yes.
So if you can share, because some folks may not even know the story, because we know you as a journalist.
Yes.
We know you as an activist. We know you in so many other different lenses. So how did we get to this point? So before we even got to We Are Not Broken, how did we even get to the point of George M. Johnson, the author?
Yeah, so I was a journalist first for several years. Had written for just about every major magazine publication that I had ever wanted to write for. And, I had this, after Moonlight came out, I just had like this nagging idea like, yeah, I think I'm finally kind of ready to tell my story a little bit. At the time, we had a couple of really, really amazing queer memoirs come out. Darnell Moore's No Ashes in the Fire, Michael Arsenault's I Can't Date Jesus, and Saeed Jones's, I always forget Saeed's book title name, but Saeed Jones was also an amazing writer and friend, also had a queer memoir, and Casey Gerald. There were like these 4 really amazing memoirs that came out prior to mine. And I was like, well, I want to do this, but what does it look like when we do this for like young adults? Because my book specifically was meant for young adults. Right before I was about to write it, there was a young kid by the name of Giovanni Melton who was killed by his father. And one of the police reports that came out, it was November 2017, I believe. And one of the police reports that came out, the father stated to the police that I would rather have a dead son than a gay son. And that realistically had became the catalyst to say, like, I've written my story in pieces for a long time, but it was time to put the totality of the journey together, and to put my story out there to show that there are Black families that have queer children within them that love and support and nurture and protect them. And we don't all have to fall into this model of where queerness has to be demonized and queerness has to be pushed out of the Black community. as I always say, if you truly believe that black people are the first people that inhabited the earth, then you have to believe that blackness is inherently queer, because that means that queer people were also here at the beginning of the earth. And so I just wanted to make sure that I told a story that showcased the fact that, you know, I was black and queer, but I existed within a space full of heterosexual people. And that was what All Boys Aren't Blue became. And I mean, I think I'm still shocked and blown away by the response to that book. To get like emails from people who are 70 and 80 years old who say this is the first time they ever felt seen in the book. It's a little bittersweet, but now I know that it's out there. And so no one else has to not feel seen. I actually did like a reading with All Boys Aren't Blue with 32 senior citizens who were black and queer. And I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world, like to have like these elders asking me questions, but also like telling their story and saying like their story had never been told. And so that really was what the catalyst was. Although it was for children, I think it freed up a lot of space for a lot of people who still hadn't felt seen.
And let's talk a little bit about, because it's kind of out there, but I know we laugh about this a lot, Gabrielle Union.
Yes.
So how did that come? I promise you, we're getting to the journey, but I know there's so many things that, you know, folks have kind of, you know, heard a little bit about. So yeah. This is the you gonna get it all today kind of thing. So yes, let's talk about Gabrielle Union. You get a call, and here we are.
Yeah, so Gabrielle Union. So when Zaya first started talking about the transitions, it was very, very early on. I was a columnist for Afropunk, and so I wrote a story just comparing Zaya's story to my own about what can happen when you have a family that fully supports you and affirms you on your journey through queerness. And I compared the elements of the story to mine. Gabrielle and Dwayne both saw the story and both sent me DMs, direct messages separately, talking about the story and just talking about, one, thanking me for writing it, but two, also like, you know, like we're learning. So watching you is helping us, because like now that we know that you exist with this story and other folks who exist with this story, we can kind of like help, y'all are helping us figure out this journey with Zaya. From there, me and Gabrielle just started to form like a friendship that was like really, really built upon just her understanding of other communities and wanting to uplift and platform us. So she was one of the first people to get an advance copy of All Boys Aren't Blue, which had came out probably like months way before the book had come out. And I didn't hear anything, so I didn't know. I was like, okay, like cool, like she probably likes it, or you know, or maybe they don't, I don't know. But the book ended up coming out in April, but March, I think it was like March 4th of 2020, like a month and a half before the book came out, we got a call and it was like, hey, like Gabrielle's production company wants to talk with you about the book. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so we had one phone call of me and her production company, and they loved the book and loved everything about it. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, okay, so we have to have like, I guess, a bunch more meetings and all of this stuff. And they were like, nope, this is the one we're going to submit, you know, to Sony to see if we can get this picked up. And I was just like, oh, okay. And 11 days later, Sony responded back, because they were like, well, if Sony doesn't like it, it may take us a couple months. If Sony really likes it, they'll come back fast. We never know with these things. So I was like, okay. Yeah, it was really like maybe 11, 12 days later, Sony came back and was like, yeah, we want it. And so from there, you know, we signed a deal to develop All Boys Aren't Blue into a television show. You know, that was 15 months ago when that announcement came out. So I know a lot of people are like, is this still happening, or like what's going on? But I got an email Friday, so I can confirm that it is still happening. Because I got a really good email Friday. We worked really, really long and hard on the treatment to make sure everything was done properly, but we got a really, really good email Friday. So there will be some news, hopefully within the next, I'll say 45 days, about what's going on with it. But trust me, it's moving forward.
All right, that's wonderful. And then, you know, one of the things that came out of All Boys Aren't Blue, which I thought was really, really powerful, is that you brought in so many different facets of the journey of George M. Johnson. I love how you intertwine even those really, I think, brave spaces that you ventured into. And I think, you know, clearly it has taken the world by storm. So at what point did you say, okay, it's time for the next chapter, if you will, and the birth of We Are Not Broken?
Yeah, so this is, I guess it's kind of interesting. This was not supposed to be my second book. My second book was supposed to be, I wanted to write a fiction book based off of, well, I'm old enough I can say it now, based off of my pledge process at Virginia University of joining a fraternity. I wanted to do like a fictionalized story kind of around like that. Submitted it, wrote it. It was like, okay, this is kind of cool, but everybody is really loving, the first memoir. And, there were a few stories basically that were cut from All Boys Aren't Blue because they were like, it didn't fit the theme, but the stories were great. And so my agent, Patrice Caldwell, was like, what do you feel about, writing another nonfiction book and taking those stories and kind of building it out? This was like December 1st, 2019. It was really, really a tough period for me, but in my mind, I was like, well, Nanny, who at that moment was in her final days, I was like, well, maybe this will help me get through kind of that process of what grief is going to look like. So it was December 1st, 2019, when I told her that I would write this particular book. Nanny passed away December 3rd. Of 2019. I had taken care of her I gave up my apartment in Brooklyn, moved back home with my parents, which is another book, to be 33 or 34, I think at the time, and living with my parents for the first time since I was 17. But I moved back in with my parents, and me and my mother, we didn't want my grandmother in hospice, so me and my mother took care of my grandmother for the last 6 months of her life. And that basically became what this story was about. What I thought was going to start out as just like this story about like Black boyhood that kind of touched on a couple of more of my grandmother's elements. She really became the focal point of the story. Throughout the first draft, I kept writing about like these wisdoms she would give us. And so when my editor came back, she was like, I think each chapter should kind of start with one of these. Like, she was like, are there any more like of these funny sayings that your grandmother would have? And I was like, well, yeah, there are a bunch more of them. So what ended up happening was this book became like my family's way of healing. And so the family group chat, I sent a message and was like, hey, the publisher wants more of Nanny's quotes. And so my mom was like, well, I remember this one from when we was little. And then my uncle was like, oh, you got to put this one in the book. And so the book kind of ended up becoming like our family's journey through healing the loss of my grandmother. And I think when I say we are not broken, that's really what it meant. It was the fact that she was the glue that held us all together. And even in her afterlife, us making this book together in many ways kind of was the glue that sealed it all, knowing that we were going to be okay after it.
So, and I want us to go talk a little bit more about Nanny, but I just want to say to those that are watching on Facebook, if you have questions, just put them in the chat. It's being monitored, and we'll make sure that those questions are engaged in the conversation as well. We'll have some engagement with the live audience here too. But when we were doing the project together for All Boys Aren't Blue, we talked a lot about Nanny. So can you share obviously Nanny is your grandmother, but in the deeper peeling back the weeds, if you will, who was Nanny as it relates to your life and the life of your family?
Yeah, she was, for many years, she was my best friend. And I guess I just didn't see it as that because she was my grandmother. But, for my family, she was really the matriarch, although she was the youngest of her. I always have to explain it out. So technically, she was the 10th of 13 siblings. Her 3 youngest siblings died in a fire when they were little. And so she became the baby. And because she became the baby, I don't know, maybe her survival through that, like maybe her way of processing grief was to just like become like this really tough, strong, front-facing type of woman. And I think it's interesting because like in writing the book, I guess I didn't realize how young she was when she was going through so many things. But she had my mother when she was 16. And then she was a grandmother by the time she was 39. But, by the time she was 45, she had basically took my 2 cousins in Roland Rasul, who I talk about in the book. But again, it's like once you start doing ages, years, and timelines, you're like, oh, wow, she was like a 45-year-old woman who was still raising her own kids and then was taking in some of her grandchildren and ensuring that we all had like the finer things in life. One of the things she used to say was what she got wrong with her kids, she always wanted to make sure she got right with her grandkids. And so I think for her, her ultimate goal was to make sure that she was just setting us up for the best life available. She always said she grew up poor, but she said they grew up poor, but their parents never let them know that they were poor. And I always found that like such an interesting thing, because technically when she was raising her kids, they weren't the wealthiest of people. She was 16. My grandfather was, I think, 19 when they first started their family. So they didn't have wealth either, but my mother and them always said, but we didn't know we were growing up poor either. And so once she did start to have a modicum of wealth, she really, really shared that with us as her grandchildren. And she ensured that, one, we got out of the city. She always used to say, like, a lot of black kids never get to, not alone leave their city, but never get to leave their state. And she always wanted to make sure that we saw the world, and like that travel and like going to see other places was like something that was ingrained in us. The second thing she always instilled in us was community values. She always said charity started at home, but she was just very, very big on helping people. She always said, if you're blessed, you bless others. That's period how it goes. And so she would instill that type of value in us to go out in the community and do that. For me, she could always tell I was really, really quiet and kind of reserved. And so I was like her sidekick for many, many years. Probably from the age of 10 till 17 when I went to college, I was with her primarily at flea markets, garage sales, anything she wanted to do. I was right there with her, casino trips, like all of the things, like whatever it was she wanted to do, I was right there by her side. I think she just knew how to fill the voids and the gaps that all of us were missing. Whether it was our parents that may have missed something, she picked up on that. If community wasn't providing something for us, she picked up on that. She just really led our family as a matriarch in a way that I guess I haven't really seen, but she just wanted to be like the ultimate grandmother figure and just teach all of us like what it just meant to be great human beings. And I think at the end of the day, she's like a testament to the fact that black women have just carried us for millennia and they never get their flowers. And so in many ways, like this is just kind of giving her her flowers. You know, when you write these things or when you create stories, sometimes you have these expectations built up that these people are still going to be here. And I never thought that there would be a day where I was writing All Boys Aren't Blue or this and she wasn't sitting here or sitting on the tour. But she's not, but she is here. And I think like me being able to put her words in the world forever, you know, I just think that's like a really cool and dope thing to honor her, because she truly was a force to be reckoned with. And I think, you know, now the world gets to meet her.
Well, I think that is a great segue to have George read a little bit from We Are Not Broken.
I know. I should have picked what I was going to read, right?
I think you can read about anything and everybody will be okay. So. While he's doing that, how many already have their copy of All Boys Aren't Blue? Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and ask, how many of y'all brought your copy of All Boys Aren't Blue so you can get it signed? Because George and I were talking about that earlier, how, you know, because of COVID, that it really alleviated the opportunity to have, you know, a book tour. So this is kind of becomes the duality for him, if you will.
I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I'm like trying to find, because I did have a section I wanted to read.
Okay.
You want me to read a whole chapter? Or just a section? Just a section?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then what we'll do is immediately after George is finished with reading that section, you know, we'll filter if there's any questions that folks have. We'll check with our Facebook crew and see if there's any questions there, and we will continue through the conversation. And I assume that everybody's following George on Instagram and all the social media, because he keeps a lot going on and shares a lot of great information.
I'm going to read the letter because that's actually short.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the things that I did with All Boys Aren't Blue, which kind of came like, after I had wrote the first draft, like I had wrote this one letter within it, and like my editor was like, "That's kind of cool that you wrote this letter. Like, do you feel like there are other spaces you want to write a letter?" And so with the first book, that was kind of like the through line was like these letters that I had wrote where it was like I didn't feel like it necessarily needed a chapter, but I still wanted to be able to say something to get it off my chest. And so with the new book, one of the things that I decided to do was allow space for myself as well as my cousins and all of the grandchildren to write letters to her. So every grandchild has a letter in this book that's written to Nanny post her passing. So I'm going to read my letter to her today because, yeah, I'm just going to read my letter to her today. So it says, from Matt, as Amara stated, nobody in my family called me George. Enough of y'all have read All Boys Aren't Blue to understand that she was the one who said we are not calling a baby George. And she is the one who gave me my middle name, Matthew, because she was like, I cannot imagine calling a baby George. Like, it just didn't make sense to her. And so I go by Matt to my entire family. Nobody in my family to this day calls me George. And there are still some people in my family that do not know that my name is George. So that is also another thing. So from Matt to Nanny. Dear Nanny, I knew this day would come, the day when your physical body had served its purpose here on earth, and you became that magical spiritual power we could call on to remind us of our faith and cover us with blessings and prayers from the other side. You were more than just a grandmother to me. You did all the grandma things, of course. The Christmas gifts, the birthday gifts, the big hugs whenever I saw you, the amazing food you would cook for us as both kids and adults. You were a matriarch unlike any other. But the most important thing you were to me and to all of us was a companion. In losing you, I didn't lose just a grandmother. I lost one of my best friends. That's been the hardest thing for me to process. Blood makes you family, but it's the relationships you build that make it special and something different, something magical, something black and joyous. That's what we had. It wasn't until I was older that I realized how much time you and I spent together over my adolescent years. Every Saturday, I was your flea market partner. You would pay me $5 an hour to set up our section and help you sell odds and ends. And on Sundays, when we didn't go to church, we would do the same thing again. It was our time. I learned the art of the hustle, how to sell and make my own money, and it's something I still do to this day. Eventually, I even became your banker and sat in your room counting all the hidden envelopes of money you kept in case of emergencies. Do you remember when we started the soup kitchen? Friday nights, we would go to the church and prepare food together. As the soup cooked over the stove, we would stay up and play Rummy 500 until 1 a.m. Afterward, we would package and store everything in the church fridge. The next morning, we would return and make deliveries to the sick and shut-in throughout the city of Plainfield. You taught me how to be an activist and care for my community from a very young age. You were my constant. You were the person we could all go to if we had a problem that needed to be fixed. The person we could come to for breakfast before work, for dinner, and for dinner after. Even as we got older, you were still such a cool lady. You were 70 when you bought a huge pickup truck. Who does that? Driving through the city with your purple church hat and one hand on the steering wheel. I'm really going to miss your earthly being, although I know I can call on your spirit whenever I need. Do you remember the conversation we had in the hospital a few months before you passed? I don't even think you know how powerful your words were that day. They were words that the 5-year-old boy who knew he was different finally needed to hear so that he could be free. Words that the 33-year-old man sitting in front of you that day also needed to finally be free. You looked at me and said, Matt, you're not just gay, right? I looked up while giggling and said, no, I'm not just gay. The ladies in the church always ask me, is Matt gay? And I say, no, but if you want to know, ask him. I laughed some more, and then you said it. You never were really a boy, but you also weren't a girl. You just always sat somewhere in the middle. Your words were so simple yet moving. My whole life, I feared accepting that I really didn't have a gender, but that I existed as something that I couldn't name. Thankfully, we now have the words and the language I needed, and I can say that I am non-binary. But it wasn't until then that I knew someone else saw it, my biggest fear. In that moment, it didn't matter anymore. I found the courage to be myself because I knew you knew and would protect me. It took cancer 6 attempts to take you away from us. But little did cancer know that you were going to a place where it could no longer attack your body. A place of no pain, no sorrows, and no worries. Although I wish we could have kept you here, for some of us, for some of the big blessings to come in our life, we had to let go of the biggest presents we all knew. Our family will never be the same without you, but we are stronger and better because of everything you taught us and everything we do on your behalf. You didn't really die. Real ones never die. I've come to realize you are very much alive, just in a different form. I still talk to you out loud, still laugh when I write. Still laugh when I write your stories. When I speak your name, I get a chill bump, letting me know that you are still here. And in the moments when it's really, really quiet, I can hear you. I can hear you. I've told your stories, and now you will live on forever in the thoughts and minds of so many. Thank you for everything you did for us, especially your grandsons you raised together. Oh, and we know Kennedy and Garrett are your favorite grandchildren, but it won't stop us from arguing about it every holiday. Love, Matt.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone right now? You can just raise your hand. If not, we'll do a little bit more conversing. Jason, are we good on Facebook? So, okay, well, as we continue, George, how did you go to your cousins and say, I'm bringing everybody into the fold of this, or how did that part, fold in? 'Cause I think it's beautiful when you said that everybody kind of got their moment to pay tribute to, but what did that look like from the family connection to bring them into this world of literary world that you're in now?
Yeah, writing memoir is not easy because you're telling other people's story who don't have a chance to respond. And so you have to handle it with a lot of care. And so because this is my second memoir, I kind of had All Boys Aren't Blue to give me a framework of like how you write about people to ensure that you're not demonizing them to the world. And also writing about, even if they traumatize you, writing from a place of restorative justice and solution-based thinking out loud. So it's not just a one-sided story, but like a full circle story, ensuring that you don't come off as, because we all know, like, we're a villain in somebody else's story. And so one of the things I go into it with is like knowing that I wasn't always perfect or I wasn't always right, and knowing that even though my cousins or whomever may have had trauma or traumatized me, they were also dealing with a trauma on their own. So in telling the story of just trauma, it has to look like what the full situation that was happening. And so with this particular book, I allowed them to tell me their sides of the story. And I think in doing that, it made them feel a lot more comfortable with the story that I was telling, a lot safer with the story that I was going to tell. It ensured that their voice got to be heard so that they actually do have a side in this story. I will say they still disagree on who broke Nanny's coffee table. As I was on my way to the tour stop in DC, and my cousins were all reading the book, as well as my little brother. We have a group chat with just the grandkids, and they were texting back and forth with who they felt still broke the coffee table. I still stand by my story that they both went through it at the same time, but they don't agree with that. But I think that's part of it, right? Like a story that in that moment looked like a really bad day for us. We can now, 30 years later, all laugh and joke about it. And so, yeah, I think it's not easy writing nonfiction. It's not easy writing other people's stories. But I think I try to do it in a way that has care and allows them the space to share their journey too. And I think that's what's so great about this book is like it's not just my perspective. You get the perspective of all of us, and you get to see how we were all, as her grandchildren, these 6 different individuals, that this one woman still had enough care, love, and nurturing to be able to pinpoint what all of our needs were and be the person to provide all of those different things for us.
So we have a question from the Facebook audience that says, what is the one characteristic of your grandmother that you see most in yourself?
Oh, that's a good one. It's got to be hustling. I think everybody know, like I work, and people, people will always be like, George, you like a machine. Like, how do you always like you deal with like a speaking engagement, a dramatic reading, a television show, this, that, like the spirit of hustle. Like she just always had something going on. One of her sayings was, "It's a sad rabbit that only got one hole." Which is that's one of the nannyisms in the book. So she always used to say, "It's a sad rabbit only got one hole," and everybody like used to be like, "What the hell does that mean?" It's like, she would be like, "If you like, come on, like if you a rabbit and you got one rabbit hole and somebody clogged that hole up, then what the hell you doing?" She like, "If you a rabbit, you got to have a hole here, a hole there, a hole here, a hole there." So when she would say that, she used to say that to my Uncle Rawl a lot. Like, listen, if and I talk about because he was a drug dealer back then, but she used to, have honest conversations like, look, you can't only just be that. Like, like, so he ended up going to hair school. He became a barber. He became like, he sold artwork. Like, he had multiple hustles, but like, that was her thing. Like,
Oh, we got to talk about Nanny. What did Nanny mean to you and to your family and to your community in terms of really being that centralizing figure that basically had rule number 1, that stigma and shame about who you are is not acceptable in her space and in any space that you're dealing with?
that's such an interesting question because it's like, I honestly don't know where she had that mindset growing up. I mean, they're from Spartanburg, South Carolina. So I don't know where her mindset came, and the mindset of her siblings too. And I guess it would more likely than not, it probably came from Grandma Lula Mae. But they just had this uncanny ability to start. Everything started from love. Like that was her thing. She would be like, everything started from a place of love, and then we figure out everything else. For anybody who's read All Boys Aren't Blue, they know I grew up with a transgender cousin, and I mean, like Hope was a trans woman growing up in my family when I was a kid, and there was no like, oh, Hope can't come to the church function, or Hope can't come to the birthday party, or Hope can't come. Hope was front and center at every single thing. And when Hope changed the name, we all changed. Okay, so Hope got a new name, and like, but it was so interesting to grow up with just like a progressive thinking, forward thinking Black woman like her. And I honestly don't know like what gave her that mindset fully to be that way. But I can honestly say she just was one of the most forward-thinking people that I had ever met. She was a person, she was a nurse for many, many years. And some of the things that she didn't really talk about was she wasn't afraid of people living with HIV during those times. She would go in there and she would sit with them until they passed away. She used to talk about, there's a term in nursing called the 11s, which is basically, you know, a person's about to pass away when the back of their neck, it starts to form like the shape of an 11. And she said that's how they used to check back in the old school days when a person was about to go. But she used to tell us about like the stories of working with people who were living with HIV and helping people who were living with HIV and not being afraid to be in rooms with them. And I honestly, I don't know. I just think she just really just was one of those women who just saw that there was so much hurt in the world and that she just could change people's lives in a way with just her presence and just her voice and just being there. She was there when Hope passed away. She kicked everybody out the room and told everybody, like, okay, it's your mean auntie, like, but it's time for you to rest now. And sat there right in the bedroom with Hope until Hope passed in the house in Jersey City. I mean, she just was that type of person to be there. She just had such a strength about her. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I think that's just like the Black matriarch, right? Like they just find a way. I guess it's like the saying, making a way out of no way. Like they always just find a way to rise to the occasion, even if they don't have the words, even if they don't have the language. The one thing that they do have is the love. And she just always had the love. So it didn't matter about identity or what you were doing, if you were doing something nefarious, because she was the first one to tell you, okay, well, you got to stop selling drugs, you got to stop doing this, but also carry your gun. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like she came from it from a perspective of me telling you to stop ain't gonna stop you, but I'm also gonna give you some tips to keep yourself safe, right? Like it was always, she always looked at the full thing. Like, and she never threw people away. That was her biggest thing, was throwing people away was not something that she wanted to do. And she used to say she just saw so many kids thrown away. She ended up raising 24 foster children for the state of New Jersey. And at one time she had took in a family of 9 while she already had a family of 4. And so she ended up with 13 kids for over a 2-year period. And one of the most interesting things was when she died, 2 of the foster kids showed up to the funeral. And literally, when I was outside talking to them, they were like, your grandmother changed the whole trajectory of all of our lives. I think one was a nurse and one was a lawyer. And, you know, she just had this mindset that, like, you just do not throw people away. And she started that with us. And I think that's why I have such a community mindset now. And my family has such a community-based mindset now.
As we wrap up the formal conversation, what is the 1, 2, maybe even 3 things that you really want people to get, or is your hopes and dreams that come from the reader connection with We Are Not Broken?
Yeah, I want people to understand, like, Black community is not a monolith, that, you know, it doesn't look the same across. That when we say, like, because I think oftentimes people say Black community, and it really should be not end with a Y, it should end with an IES, because we are communities. And I think the book, realistically, the one thing I want people to take away from it is the fact that these communities all exist kind of like Venn diagrams, like where they have intersections and circles around each other. Even though I was a queer child, I'm the queer face on the book, but my 2 cousins and my brother are all heterosexual identified. So even me being queer doesn't mean that I grow up outside of heterosexuality. And even them being heterosexual didn't mean that they grew up outside of queerness, because we all grew up together. And so I think that's the ultimate takeaway from the book, is that, oh, wow, like, when you take a step back and think about it, we all do exist within each other's worlds, and how we show up in each other's world is really the most important thing. And so, yeah, I just want people to really come away from this to understand that the communities aspect is what's most important, and understanding that we don't live outside of those things. And so when we see people stigmatized and shamed because, oh, you do this or you do that, it's like, yeah, but these things all overlap. So even if this person is doing that, you still play a role in that. right? And we all have a role and a responsibility within each other's lives, right? It's almost like we're living, and I think what's most interesting, we're living in a period of collective health for the first time in a very long time, and people are struggling with the fact that your health is now tied to my health, and my health is now tied to your health. So you can't just make an I statement that says, well, I don't want to wear a mask. It's like, yes, I understand that, or I don't want to, yes, and I totally hear you, and you have that right, but understand that your health is now connected to mine, and my health is connected to yours. That's what I want people to take away from this book. My queerness is still connected to your blackness, and your blackness is still connected to my queerness, and the matriarch story is still connected to all of us and intersects all of us. She wasn't just my grandmother. How she showed up in all of our lives made a difference in all of our lives, and she showed up in different ways, and we still all became these people. And so I think that's the ultimate thing that I would want people to take away, is to understand that the intersections really do matter.
And just one last thing, shifting over, what's next? I mean, I know you're on the book tour. I know the book just came out, but I also have watched how your life progresses. It progresses quickly. So we know that the project with Gabrielle is on the forefront right now.
Yes.
Is there another book coming out? Is there
several books?
Yes.
So I have a book coming out next year called Property of No State, where I write letters to I write letters to enslaved ancestors to tell their story and connect the past to the present in a really cool and inventive way. I have a middle grade book called 5 Second Violation that'll be coming out in 2023. That'll be my first middle grade book as well as my first fiction book. We have the story or the television show development with Gabrielle Union. And I also have, I can't say much about it, but I do have another 2 TV projects in the works. So very early stage stuff, but yes, I have
a lot happening.
A lot is happening. In a good way. And I also just want to make a quick note. If you look at anybody who has their books, if you look at the cover of the book and you see there's a name on the cover of the book, there's a blurb that says Nick Stone. And there's also another blurb on the back. Wait, is your blurb on the back? Well, that's Nick Stone. The amazing Nick Stone is here. And Mark Oshiro is also here. They both blurbed my book very, very early on, and I'm grateful for them. They're just amazing people in my life, and so yeah, just want to make sure we shout.
So now we know who Nick Stone is.
The great Nick Stone.
The great Nick Stone. Yes.
She wrote Dear Martin.
Oh, okay. Very
Look,
good.
everybody's like, oh.
And how can folks who are not already following you, how can they stay connected to you?
Oh, I mean, I'm around. Look, social media, I am
now,
GM
come on,
Johnson.
He's the one that helped me kind of get it.
No, I am GM Johnson on everything. Instagram, Twitter, George Matthew Johnson on Facebook, because like I said, certain people don't know the difference between Matthew or George, so I put my full name on Facebook.
So thank you. Let's give a round of applause for George Matthew Johnson.
Thank you.
And also for those watching on Facebook, if you go to the email that you were sent, as well as on the page, there's a link that if you want to purchase your book, that will be an autographed copy of the book. And again, a portion of the proceeds will benefit Aid Atlanta, as well as the Hammond's House Museum. And if you are not already familiar with Hammond's House Museum, where we are residing, was actually the gift of Dr. O.T. Hammonds, who transitioned many, many years ago and was a renowned African-American physician and had one of the greatest collection of black art in the nation. And so in his transition, this home and I think at that time 250 pieces of his collection were gifted to Fulton County. And at that time, Fulton County was really looking at how to ensure that there was accessibility in all communities to art and culture. And under the vision and leadership of then the chairman of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, Michael Lomax, they made this beautiful home into the Hammond's House Museum, which is now definitely throughout the city and throughout the county is the only visual arts institution focused on celebrating and presenting artists from the African diaspora. So, as they say, it's black, blackity black. And we encourage you that, if you are not aware of the Hammond's House, to please come visit them often. Please become a member. You can start as easy as $12, $15, and I will say the membership has its privileges. And just, in general, not that we are not world citizens and embracing all people, but I see so many black and brown folks in this audience, and that if we do not support and uplift our own institutions, then we cannot ask folks from any other community to uplift and support our own institutions. And the Hammond's House is not only a visual arts institution, but it is a place, as you can see, that is about gathering in community. So we also encourage you to, to rent the space. It's great space inside. You got this great space here for any type of activity that you would like to have and be in community. So, George, we thank you. Where's the next city from here? Home. Home. Until he comes back to Atlanta in a couple of weeks. And last, but we do want to remind you that to please feel free to join us on September 26th at the landmark Midtown Art Cinema, which, if you don't know, that's the one on Monroe next to Trader Joe's. I believe it's at 7 o'clock p.m., but we'll be sending out more information for the film screening, meaning on the big picture screen, if you will, of All Boys Aren't Blue. I know many saw it through the virtual presentation, but the director, Nathan Hale Williams, recently saw it at Outfest, and he was sending pictures, and he just said, I was just crying, because he said, as you can imagine, there's nothing like seeing a broadcast production on the big screen. So we invite you to come out, and we are hoping to try to get George back and Nathan in the same space to do a Q&A at that time. Again, stop by the Aid Atlanta table, find out more information, come out and join us on the 25th for the AIDS Walk. Join the Aid Atlanta team that's here if you want to, or join the team of the 9 other organizations, or just come out and walk, or run if you're a runner. And it is a qualifying race for whatever, thank you. I was going to say for whatever runners have to qualify for. I knew it qualified for something. Thank you. Thank you. It is a qualifying race to be in the Peachtree Road Race and all those things. And again, a special thank you to the team here at the Hammond's House Museum. And to Tim Farmer. Tim, if you would wave your hand. Tim is who has been working with us in the Conversations in Black to handle all of the live streaming. And also, if you wanted to see the conversation again or want to share it on the Black website and on the Facebook page, we now have a YouTube channel. We'll be posting the link there. So it's blacc.net. And then, of course, it's Black Leadership AIDS Crisis Coalition, powered by HF on Facebook. So we're going to give Matthew a minute to just go chill for a second, and then folks want to line up, and then we'll bring it right back out, and we'll go right into signing. And in the mix, we'll have DJ Said just setting the vibe for us. Thank you, DJ Said. Thank you all, and we'll be right back with the book signing.